This is a book review video. It will contain spoilers of the book in order to assess its contents. If you like reading books unspoiled, I would recommend this book. No Longer Human is a Japanese novel written by Osamu Dazai, first published in 1948. The novel is a half-fiction, half-autobiography that covers the youth and struggles of the author and his broader feelings about society. The book is fraught with angst, tragedy, and failure. It presents a very bleak retrospective on the man's life and the caricature the author uses to express his problems. The novel is very well regarded in Japanese literature, and it is the second best-selling novel in Japan after Natsume Soseki's book with similar themes, Kokoro. It is regularly taught in college literature courses in high schools in Japan, and after reading the novel, its renown and ubiquity surprised me, because of how extreme its events and ideas become. If I had to compare it to a Western novel, imagine Catcher in the Rye, but written by an actual contrarian and continues years past adolescence with no cop-out happy ending. In terms of exploring the themes of isolation, alienation, and vice, it does a much better job. The first part of the book covers the early childhood of Dazai's character Oba, who in all likelihood is simply a representation of the author himself. The author describes in depth his thought processes, anxieties, and childish strategies to deal with society. The main focus of this part is Oba's plan to clown around and engender the laughter of others, a desperate act to hide his lack of ability to understand and relate to other people. A particular passage that sticks out is when Oba is pretending to be unathletic to make his classmates laugh, but is seen through by one of the less popular children, Takechi. Oba then laments to the extreme at being found out. He proceeds to placate and befriend Takechi, eventually confiding in him with his strange feelings and strange morbid paintings that he hides from the rest of society. It is this insecurity in both the ability to relate to others and the fear of society lashing out and demolishing him that motivates Oba's behavior throughout the novel. Here in the first part that covers the feelings of childhood and growing up, the prose is clearest and most biting. The thoughts Oba relates are both concise and understandable. He very cleanly lays out his philosophy on strangers. His actions can both be said to be rational or respectable, but this degrades as the novel progresses. The second part of the novel covers the time period where Oba, presumably Dazai, goes to college in an urban center. Coming from a family of wealth, he is expected to attend classes from a high-class university, but quickly shirks them to pursue painting and romping around town pleasure-seeking with a newfound friend, Hariki. Spurred on by Hariki's careless hedonism, Oba begins drinking and seeking women both paid and convinced, as he avoids his responsibilities. It is here Oba begins falling into the traps of alcoholism and brothels. However, no matter what pleasure he seeks, he still remains utterly distant and disdainful of those around him, even his newfound partner, Hariki. Oba would repeatedly blow all the money given to him by his family for education expenses on drinking and pleasure. He went up to other antics like hanging around the communist Japanese for the purpose of aesthetics, or because he thought it was funny. Ultimately, despite having the attention of many women, Oba could not find companionship or confide in anyone and became fed up with life and the expectations of others. He attempted to take his own life in a double suicide with his lover via drowning. She died and he survived. After this incident, the narrative shifts to the final part of the story. Oba is reined in by his family and forced to stay away from the city with an old family friend. Not having any aim, he lives off their charity, which are actually payments sent to the family friend by Oba's older siblings. He is then picked up as a house husband by a wealthy woman and has a child with her. He tries his hand at being a cartoonist for her publication, but ultimately resorts to alcoholism and sells their belongings to fund his drinking habits. One day, disgusted with himself, he walks out, never to see them again. He works as a cartoonist in a drunken stupor and meets another girl who he marries. Upon remarrying, he tries to set himself straight, both the influence of his old friend Hariki, turns back to alcoholism and eventually opiates. In one such stupor, he witnesses his wife getting raped and falls into deeper despair. After this, he attempts suicide again and is institutionalized. This is, of course, just a summary of the story and lacks the nuance, deep prose, and inner thought present in the work. As the story progresses and Dazai's caricature falls into further hedonism, so do the sympathies of the audience and the wisdom of his sayings and actions. What started as a lonely fear of society devolved into endless pleasure-seeking. This results in the destruction of himself and those around him. Egged on by bad actors like Hariki and his own weakness, Oba despises life itself and attributes it mostly to his own failure. The book is certainly a good read, but it is not without issue. If you relate to Dazai's sentiments about alienation from your fellow man, he does not provide any solutions. His lack of a solution, of course, is what leads to the tragic nature of the book and his character, but you miss a resolution. There is the thesis about the alien nature of society, the antithesis in Dazai's debauchery and self-hatred, but no synthesis or useful solution. Instead, the book is simply a moral guideline of what not to do. It was refreshing compared to Western literature, which usually would glamorize hedonism instead of depicting it as a bottomless, miserable hole. If books like this are considered classic literature and required educational reading, I can see how Japan would turn out better than the United States, at least on that subject. Ultimately, this book is a compelling read about the human condition, and I would recommend it to anyone who wants to read something that will elicit thought and emotion. If you are trying to find a book to solve your problems with alienation from society, it will not have what you seek, but is a good study of the subject nonetheless. In summary, Catcher in the Rye, done correctly by the Japanese.